Chefs Without Restaurants, episode 66 with Bill Smith.
When I first got there were mostly students or recently graduated students lots of them who worked just a couple of shifts. It was like a staff of, there were a couple of full-time people, but most people just worked a shift or two or three. And the Latino people were the dishwashers, right? So as these students would eventually go away because they would graduate and they go find jobs and go move somewhere else or whatever. It turned out that these dishwasher guys had been watching the whole time. And there was an instance where I was short one night and Jorge Martinez said, well, I can do that. I've been watching for years. I'm sure I can go do it. And so he did. And it was like, oh my God. So then as it happened, as the student guys would go away, this wasn't something intentional. It's just the way it worked out. It was the easiest way to deal with a shortage. Is that as guys would go away, then the dishwasher guy would raise their hand and say, I can do that. And in fact, they could. And they were great. They just, once they knew what you wanted them to do, then you never had to worry about it again.
This is the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast with your host, Chris Spear. Each week, I'll be speaking with food entrepreneurs and people in the culinary industry. If you're interested in learning more about our organization dedicated to helping people build and grow their food businesses, look us up on the web at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Chefs Without Restaurants. Now, enjoy the show. Happy Monday, everyone. On the show this week, I have Chef Bill Smith. Bill was the chef at Crook's Corner in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 25 years before retiring in January of 2019. I wanted to talk to Bill about his time at Crook's Corner and what he plans to do now that he's retired. Bill's always been something of an activist. Many of his employees at the restaurant were from Mexico and have become like family to Bill. He's been talking a lot about immigration and trying to find ways to support those former employees. In fact, Mexico has become one of his favorite places to travel, and he would have been there right now if it weren't for COVID. We also talk about food, from his Atlantic Beach pie to the famous shrimp and grits that Crook's Corner helped put on the map. Bill's authored 2 cookbooks, been nominated for a number of James Beard Awards and won one, and helped start the Cat's Cradle music venue down there. One more thing before I go. I've recently launched the Chefs Without Restaurants newsletter. If you're interested, there's a link in the show notes, or you can go to chefswithoutrestaurants.org for the link. I'll be sending emails with links to shows, member news, cool things I like, gear recommendations, and more. And now, time for the show. So thanks so much, and have a great week. Welcome, everyone. This is Chris Spear, and today on the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast, I have Chef Bill Smith. Bill was the chef at Crook's Corner in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 25 years before retiring in 2019. He's the author of 2 cookbooks and was the owner of Cat's Cradle music venue. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Hey there. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm cool. It's great.
So you've had a long history in the food business. I mean, 25 years just at one restaurant. That's almost unheard of these days for someone to stay somewhere so long.
It suited me. And I, once I sort of established myself, I got to have my own way. So that helps.
So kind of let's get into your backstory, I guess, off the bat a little bit. What's your background with food? I mean, did you come from a family that loved food and eating? Were you, did you have this history of you're by your grandmother's side that so many chefs talk about? What was that like?
Some yes, some no. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina at a time when there was usually a woman in the house all the time, the housewife or the grandmother or something. You don't see that so much any longer because women now work. They have to, unfortunately. But at the time, there was something called a housewife. And so my grandmothers actually were in charge of 2 large households. And they did the cooking. And it was always good. I mean, I always expected food to be good. And I didn't cook with them. My great-grandmother on my mother's side was the best cook, but she didn't want anybody bothering her. So occasionally I would be able to, hang out with her. But anyway, I didn't realize at the time, but it was setting me up for my career because since I grew up expecting food to always be good, then that was something I felt like I also needed to do when I began cooking. I backed into being in the restaurant business there because as you said, I was part owner of a music club here in Chapel Hill, and we never could make any money. We were such poor business people that we all had to go find other jobs, and I ended up in a restaurant. And so over time, as I grew tired of running a club, I was also realizing how the sort of the aesthetic of the restaurant kitchen suited me. So it was a bit of good luck, I think.
But you didn't grow up with this burning desire to be a chef. Like,
It didn't even cross my mind until I was one. Really, I mean, my first chef job. I was the elevated because of attrition. It wasn't because I was scrambling for the position. It was like.
so was it that first job when you had the Cat's Cradle that kind of got you into the industry? Was that your first foray into the food business?
Yeah, I'd waited tables like in college, but yeah, essentially yes. Mm-hmm.
And where was that job?
It was a little place downtown called the Carolina Coffee Shop. I mean, it was a college breakfast and beer and coffee and eggs.
So then you ended up connecting with Bill Neal, who went on to open Crook's Corner. Is that right? You started working for him?
When I started with him, he was at La Residence. I never worked with him at Crook's Corner.
So you cooked at Crook's Corner for 25 years.
Yeah, but he had been dead about 5 years before I went over there.
So what was the evolution of food like there when you started? Did you kind of just inherit all the menus that were there and just kept going with the menus that existed?
Sort of, yeah. I had been at La Residence and it had gotten sold. It had been sold, and so I was sort of looking for a job. And Gene, who was Bill's partner at Crook's Corner, just called me up and said, "Come down here and work." And it was so much busier than what my other job had been that I didn't have time to do much else except keep up. And I had to learn. It was how long had it been there by then? Probably 10 years old by then, I guess. And so it had a regular clientele who had favorites and expectations and things like that I was sort of obliged, to keep. My background was good, and I was from Eastern North Carolina, and it was a Southern restaurant. So I had a repertoire in waiting, but I moved it in very slowly. Like I said, at first, it's just because I could not keep up. It was so much harder than than my other job had been, just because of volume. So as I sort of got my footing, I was then at liberty to introduce things as it made sense, as I had time. As a lot of it was really seasonal, and so if the season and the time worked out in a good way, then I could introduce things. And then slowly over time, the things that I began to introduce became the majority. And they became the favorites and the things that the clientele looked for. But there were some things I never got rid of. I never changed a lot of things that I inherited, and I was grateful for most of those recipes. So,
I've heard a lot about shrimp and grits. That's one of the things that you guys became known for.
Bill did that. He's something he grew up with in South Carolina. It was just a breakfast. It was a fisherman's breakfast, is the way he described it. And he thought, why not put this on the menu and see how it goes? And you see how it went. And now it's inescapable. But that was something I didn't change. I would never dream of changing that. That would be silly. I was always grateful, actually, that was one thing I did not have to replace. But what I've done, if I'd had to replace all those with something else every night. So that was cool.
I've read a lot about the iconic dishes that you've gone on to put on that menu that seem to be on there forever. What is is it Atlantic beach pie?
Yeah, I call it that stupid pie at this point, but it's something I grew up with in Eastern North Carolina. It's a variation on it. There are many recipes for it. It's essentially, it's a lemon pie, but the thing that makes it distinct is that, excuse me, the crust is made with saltine crackers. And that's it was something that all the seafood restaurants along the coast had on their menus. It was just a tradition there that wasn't well known elsewhere. Some people use saltine, some people use Ritz crackers, some people use Captain's Wafer, some people use oyster crackers. And this starts little fights, of course. But anyway, I did saltine crackers really because the day I did a test, that was what I had. It wasn't like I better tasted all the crackers instead of do this. It was not that. So, and it was fine. It was really good, and I left it alone. But it like I say, it caused this dust up. But it was just something that I grew up with, and that I hadn't thought about in a million years. The Southern Foodways Alliance was coming to Eastern North Carolina. They were using New Bern, my hometown, as their base. They wanted me to do one Eastern North Carolina dinner one night that was not barbecue. And I was just thinking of things that I remembered fondly growing up, or that were typical of the region, and that was I was saying, oh yeah, that pie. Remember how good that was? I wonder, and I went to some church school books and poked around and found a couple of different recipes and came up with this version. And then it sort of took on a life of its own. And now it's, like I said, it's inescapable now. So
What was the makeup of the kitchen employees like when you started to where it is now? I know you've talked about having a lot of employees from Latin America, but was that the case when you started?
There were some, mostly. I think it had been there. There were a lot of when I first got there. There were mostly students or recently graduated students who, lots of them who worked just a couple of shifts. It was like you know, a staff of there were a couple of full time people, but most people just worked a shift or two or three. And the Latino people were the dishwashers, right? So I had never known any people from Mexico before. I don't recall ever. So I just, I was trying to make friends with them too, and we got to be buddies. And my Spanish is, well, I had studied Spanish a long time ago, but I hadn't used it in years and years. But anyway, it's sort of fun, a new language and all the misunderstandings that can cause are always really funny. And we just got to be buddies. And as these students would eventually go away because they would graduate and they go find jobs and go move somewhere else or whatever. And it turned out that these dishwasher guys had been watching the whole time. And there was an instance where I was short one night and Jorge Martinez said, well, I can do that. I've been watching for years. I'm sure I can go do it. And so he did. And it was like, oh my God. So, so then as it happened, as the student guys would go away, this wasn't something intentional. It's just the way it worked out. It was the easiest way to deal with a shortage. Is that as guys would go away, then the dishwasher guy would raise their hand and say, I can do that. And in fact, they could. And they were great. They just, once they knew what you wanted them to do, then you never had to worry about it again. You didn't have to stand over them and swear and all this kind of stuff. And so in no time at all, it was as unintentional. Not all of my kitchen, but a good portion of it were guys from Mexico. So, and the rest is history, sort of, because now they're my very best friends ever. So,
did that impact the type of food you were doing or flavors or anything? I mean,
yeah.
Because a lot of times it doesn't. There are a lot of really well-known Michelin 3-star French restaurants where the whole kitchen crew is from Mexico, but you wouldn't see any of that kind of influencing the menu. But you seem to let it impact the dishes a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I don't see why not. I mean, for one thing, it's a Southern restaurant and they live in the South now. So there's a lot of them in North Carolina, 500,000 at one count. So, and the food's good. There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't put on, my first impulse, honestly, was to resist a little bit of that just because I thought people were expecting it. Oh God, he's going to turn it into a Mexican restaurant. And I didn't feel like that. I didn't want to do that, but there were some things that were really good. And I use a couple of examples when people ask me this. The Mexican hominy they use for pozole is very much better than the Southern hominy, so much better that it's just once you've tasted it, you forget it, So that was one. I switched over to that style of hominy, and people have just I don't know. It's just evolution, but the public has developed a taste for hotter and hotter and hotter and spicier foods, and so that was. When I first went to work at Crook's, occasionally people would complain that the collards had too much red pepper flakes. So that never happens now. And you need, people need several choices of hot sauces and they know all the brands that you can get in the Mexican store, all this kind of stuff. So, things like that. And why would you not do that? I mean, this is, Crook's Corner was it was a Southern restaurant, but I wanted my kitchen to represent the time and place in which we lived. And that was what that was, It was seasonal, but I wanted it to be modern as well as old and comfortable. So,
what was your kitchen environment like? It seemed like you really enjoyed cooking and having a good time, and it wasn't this kind of yes chef, no chef, very strict formal environment. Is there a reason, or is that just your personality and how you wanted to run the kitchen?
That is me. And it worked. I think probably I didn't, at least in the beginning, I didn't feel comfortable being a boss. I don't like to be bossed around. I don't like to be told what to do. And I guess I don't like doing it to anybody else either. Because my people were reliable and competent, then it wasn't necessary for me to be just perpetually scolding everyone. I had to instruct people. I had to show them what was what, and I had to correct errors. But I'm very laissez-faire. I don't like all that crap. I don't see the point of it. I mean, and there's a lot of it. I've been saying for years that once you've had your tantrum, you still have to then go solve the problem that you had the tantrum over. So just skip that part. It's a waste of time.
And I guess some of that's inherited. We talk a lot to younger cooks, and it's I think sometimes you see that and then you learn that and then you keep doing it. It's like the cycle. And I guess, you didn't have this history of working for 10, 15 different chefs in your career before you went there. So, I guess some of it's just going in with the style you're comfortable with and not inheriting that kind of behavior.
Yeah, and I saw that behavior from time to time in other places, and I did not approve of it. So it really rubbed me the wrong way. And a lot of it, was sort of ill-aimed ambition. It didn't, like I say, it doesn't advance your menu that I can see. It's just, I don't know. It's just, yeah, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I went out of my way to not be that way, actually. And sometimes I had to give myself a talk. I get be in a bad mood or tired or something. But no. These people you need to respect the people who work for you. And if you do that, then it'll work out. 99% of the time. I guess there's always the possibility of something, but basically, no. That's not how I see things.
So you retired in 2019.
The very beginning of it. I worked until the first week in January of that year, because we had a thing called the Crook's Corner Book Prize, and that was given out in January. So I stuck around till the party for that, and then I was also turning 70, and I thought, you've been there 25 years, you're turning 70, you need to get out of town because somebody's going to do something if you don't. So the next day I was on a plane for Mexico. So
that sounds like a good way to kick off retirement.
It was great. It's my go-to for many things. But
So what do you do when you go down to Mexico?
Well, there's a bunch of guys that worked for me in the very beginning that had gone back home over the years, and also the families of people who work for me still, who are scattered all over the country. So there's one town I go to the most. It's a town called Celaya in the state of Guanajuato, which is where the bulk of the Latino people in this area came from at first. So that's where I have the most friends. So I go there at some point. I love Mexico City. It's a fabulous city. I mean, it's the biggest city in the world, and it's got everything. And I just can't get enough of it. So there's a neighborhood I like in Mexico City, and I have a hotel I always stay at there. And I go there both on my way in and out of the country. So I give myself a few days there at the beginning and a few days there when I'm coming back home. And I do whatever down there. I love Teotihuacan, the ruins out in the country, and all the museums. I love the music, and I love the food, and I love just walking around. I just like the vibe. I should have been born there. It's like, and then I hop on a bus and I go see my friends. And that first year I went all over because I had friends in the South and in the North. So I hopped on a bus and went down to Oaxaca. I have a good friend who owns a hotel in Oaxaca City. I stayed there for a while. Then I got back on the bus, went back through Mexico City, then went up to the north to Celaya, where I have most of my friends. And I don't know. I don't really do. I mean, we just drink beer and shoot the shit. I don't know. We just, like I said, they're my best friends. You don't have to do anything. I love their families. They're fun, and they both scooped me up years ago. And I don't know. We just whole babies. I don't know. Whatever.
Sounds like a good time. Just hang out and eat some really good food and have some beers.
Exactly. I've never been happier as when I'm sitting there doing that, in the butcher shop in Celaya with my friend Luis.
Yeah, I really miss travel right now. I wish I could go somewhere like that.
I would be there now. Actually, I planned to spend most of this year down there. I was going to go back in May, and I have a nephew getting married in this month, and I was going to stay down there until that wedding and just hang there. And I just like to get on the bus and wander. And I do that a lot. And it's inexpensive. It makes it really cheap, and it's you can eat well and travel well and drink well and all that stuff.
What else have you gotten into since you've been retired? And do you have any big plans? Are there things you really want to accomplish, or just kind of taking it as it goes?
Well, I was sort of in the middle of another cookbook when I retired, and then I was so busy that year I just never got around to finishing it. And now I'm trying to work on that again. Although the tone of the world has changed, so I'm not sure how I want to focus it now. It was going to be like a retrospective in a way, but I'm thinking now maybe something modest and comfortable might be better. I don't know. And I've also been working on a sort of a little memoir thing, mainly about my friends in Mexico and me and all the, our experiences. I think there's a need for undemonizing these people, if I can put it like that. The crap that's been said about them in the last few years is really horrible and offensive, and it really gets me going, and so they've actually been my main concern, ever since the election, because they were attacked so in such a way that it was just drove me crazy. And so I've been running interference for them a lot, with helping their kids. I don't know, whatever, raising money, helping their kids out. And of course, now they're all out of work, and most of them are not entitled to any sort of relief. And so a lot of those guys are in big trouble. So I've been trying to help them out however I could. And that's taken really all of my attention and energy. If we ever get through all this, I intend to get back on the road, though. And there are a couple of big trips that I'm interested. I love the music of West Africa, and for many years I have, and I've never been there. I've had a few friends from Senegal and Ghana and stuff. But anyway, I'm going to West Africa as soon as I can. That's my next thing. I'm going to go to Senegal and Cape Verde and maybe Ghana. That's a pretty big trip. But I tried to go. That was the year I retired. I tried to go, and it turned out that there was who knew, a shortage of yellow fever vaccine. And there'd been an outbreak of yellow fever in Dakar, and I wouldn't be allowed into the country without a vaccination. And I couldn't. There wasn't any of the accepted vaccine, but there was an experimental one. But you had to sign a waiver saying if it killed you, that you couldn't sue them. It cost like $800, and then it said if you're over 60, it's not advised. So there was 3 reasons not to go to West Africa that year. Now, of course, I wish I'd done it anyway because it's going to be a lot. Who knows when I'm going to get around to it? So. But that's what I want to do next. And then I also want to go, I'm always going to Mexico. I mean, I'll go there in a heartbeat, I guess.
So is Crook's Corner closed right now? Have they reopened or are they still closed?
No, they haven't. It's like everybody else. It's like all my chef friends, and, of course I have many, have gone back and forth. There were places that were sort of set up for takeout anyway, or that did a lot of takeout, have managed to transition. But a lot of places that hadn't done it, I mean, we had always done some takeout, but that wasn't what we did. You could just get what we had to go, basically, if you wanted to. A lot of it really wasn't good food for takeout, frankly. I mean, people always coming and getting fried oysters, and those are horrible when you get them home, But anyway, so we'd had takeout, but it wasn't the focus of what we did, and a lot of stuff didn't travel well, or you couldn't. How do you put it in a container, sort of thing? There's lots of reasons. So they didn't do anything because I think initially they were thinking this would be very brief and that they would just get in there and scrub the kitchen down and get going again. And now it's stretched out. How long is it? 9 months now, and it's there. But the business was sold. The year I retired, I don't know if I told you this. The building had gone up for sale, and 2 guys, one of which who had been a manager for years, and another guy who had owned a bar down the street, put together the money to buy the whole shebang because it was going to close, and the town was having a fit. No, you can't close. You've been here forever. This, somebody do something. And so that's what they did. So they were they had only taken over just a year when everything, when the shit hit the fan sort of. But they had their other businesses. There was their first, obligations because Shannon Healy has a bar and restaurant in Durham, North Carolina. He was the guy that was the manager. Gary Conklin has the bar down the street and some other places around, I think maybe even Washington. He might have one up there. Anyway, so their first obligation was to their initial businesses, right? So I think they're going to try to start doing takeout now. But the states just loosened up some of the regulations. North Carolina, we've done okay during the virus. Our governor was really good about, and the director of our state health department, she was really good. She was smart and clear and unexcitable and all this kind of things. And so people listened to her advice and did what she said. And so we've been doing okay. And so they began to lift some restrictions on places being able to open and stuff like that. But it's that whole thing about if you're only half full, can you do it? And if you're only half full, will takeout make up the difference for the rest? I think not, honestly. I don't. Some people are doing better than others, like I said. Every place I know is trying something different, it seems like. So these guys were going to do, they were talking about, I was in there not long ago. I saw them there, I stuck my head in the door, and they're thinking about doing just brunches while the weather's warm, because there's a big patio, and then some kind of takeout and just see how it goes from there. And but not being able to hire hardly anybody back and stuff, which is really too bad. And I don't know if there's a date even right now.
And you've done some fundraising for some of the employees there. Is that right? Trying to help the guys who are out of work?
Initially, it started out, I thought after the election that I would actually have to take everybody to the airport and get them out of here. That was my thought. So I started a GoFundMe thing. And so my publicist, my book agent publicist, and she sat down, she said, well, I think if everybody had to go to the airport, on short notice without any advantage of advance purchase or anything. It would cost about $10,000 to put everybody on a plane and get them back home. I said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And so but then I realized everybody needed their papers in order, their credentials. Everybody needed passports. All this kind of stuff. We got all that done, and then, but the people didn't want to go home. They'd been here for years and years. They had bought homes. Their children were born here, and they decided just to keep their heads down. And so I thought, okay, fine, we'll go with that. And so just whatever. I mean, I've done. People have been extremely generous. I'd like to say it first. People, especially people in the restaurant business, my colleagues around the country have been as generous as it's unbelievable. So I sort of got everything ready to go in case whatever happened. We've occasionally hired lawyers for people. We've done DACA renewals. I've gotten passports for all the children. There was a couple of other places around town where the people who worked there had relationships with my people and all that stuff. So we got their children passports. We got all that kind of stuff. So we just did whatever. And then what happened was this really horrifying thing where people began to take advantage of these folks because they knew they were afraid to complain. So I've had fights with landlords, and I've had fights with insurance companies, and I've had fights with all stuff, and all that's been expensive. So the money's just, who knows, I'd say, I just finally told her, I said, listen, I don't know what I'm going to use the money for. I'll just let you know as I go. And so then when this happened, everybody got thrown out of work. I just said, okay, we're just going to start paying rent. So, and it's been month by month, but I think, oh God, am I going to make it this month? And then all of a sudden, right at the end, there's a little burst of generosity, and we do. So far, so good. But it's driving me crazy and wearing me out, frankly. And the toll it's taking on these children and stuff is unpardonable. It's unpardonable because they see their parents exhibiting all this stress and in fact, their dreams have been disrupted, and that's a hard thing to watch, and I just want it all to be over with.
Yeah, I know there's not much of end in sight. We're seeing it all over, and I don't know. It seems like this thing's going to keep stretching on, and every day you see more places closing up and people out of work, and I don't know what we're going to be doing.
I don't either. And when these people are concerned, there's so much racist crap that's been unleashed, and these people are the victims of it because they're not white, and that's even worse. And so it's endless. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, and I guess most of them aren't eligible for any kind of unemployment.
Most families have mixed documentation. There'll be some people who are legal and others who are not because they wanted to be together, and that's all there is to it. And the law is such that you jeopardize the people who are eligible. If somebody who's not eligible, gets some advantage from any of these things. So the people that are eligible often don't even look for it because they're afraid of, the consequences. So anyway, it's been up to us, and so far so good. We've done it, but it's like I said, I about had it.
And I know you've been an activist over the years for a number of different things. Is that something that came naturally to you? It just seems like you have these causes, and maybe activist isn't a term you even like to identify with, but it's very easy to just sit back and do nothing, but that doesn't seem to be how you've kind of lived your life.
It does not seem to be. And I wonder why I'm such a troublemaker, and I have been that way. It runs in my family. And actually, I'm working on this piece now for the Journal of Southern Cultures. I had my great grandmother's grandmother was an abolitionist. And it depends on who told you the story, but apparently in 1858 or something, she led a procession through the streets of Philadelphia, riding a white stallion that had been drenched in blood to protest bleeding Kansas. So I blame all this on her. I'm trying to do some research now. It's hard to find out. And everybody that used to tell the story, they're all, long gone now. So I don't know. It runs, it's in me. And my mother was like this, although she was sort of a conservative. She wasn't as liberal as I am at all by any stretch of the imagination, but I do feel the obligation, and I'm not sure why, to stand up for things that or objective things that I think are wrong. And it's been all over the place. I sound like some sort of, I don't know what, but I don't know. It's just my conscience insists that I do these things.
So what are your thoughts on the food industry in general? I mean, I know you've seen a lot. What are we going in the right direction? I talk to people all the time kind of about kitchen culture and what needs to change. And I think we're making some strides in the right direction, but there's a long ways to go. Any thoughts on that from what you see?
Yeah, and I've seen it's from people, my colleagues who are much younger than I, and I started noticing it a few years ago. where they were a little more ethical in the way they ran their businesses and the way they chose to do things. And I mean that in many ways. They would try to source locally because it kept money in their communities. They would try to use things that were healthy as opposed to not, unless, they're, I don't know, sometimes you just have to have cheese wheels, but you know what I mean. They would try to make good decisions in how and what they made. They treated their employees with respect. And I noticed it in my younger colleagues years ago, and there's more of that now. There's a real, there's a whole bunch of people around this area of the Triangle that are restaurant owners and business owners and stuff like that that make that part. In other words, I think what you have to do is you have to, and I think this is a good thing, the celebrity has to go. And just look after your people, and if you do that, then you may attain celebrity. But there was a while there when this business was driven entirely by celebrity. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it maybe started out sort of without people really realizing it at first, and then it began to snowball. It became irresistible. I was also guilty of it, but that's not how to do things. That's not how to do things. You put your nose to the grindstone. You try to do a good job, and serve your community and make a decent living, and treat everybody well. And there's a lot of that now, and I see it among my younger colleagues around me. And if they can survive this, then I would think we'll see more of it. But everybody's under that economic stresses now that sometimes you have to make choices that are not in the best interest of everybody. And I guess that was a lesson that needed to be learned too. So that's what I'm hoping to see. I'm a lot less people prancing around in toques and more chefs helping the guys take the trash out at the end of the night. You know what I mean?
I was just talking to some people. I don't even really feel comfortable wearing a chef's coat anymore. I don't know why. Like, it just feels like it never fit me. Like, that was never my thing, but I had to wear one.
I wore rock and roll t-shirts. I was known for it. Usually greasy ones, and a dirty apron,
Do you have favorite rock and roll t-shirts?
I do. I had a huge collection, actually. I because I own the Cat's Cradle and still go there all the time. I can't go now, but I had over 300 band shirts, which the Southern Folklife collection at UNC has taken into their archives. I don't know what would be my favorite. There are many. I don't know. There's so many bands I love. We have a lot of good bands that come from here, so that people elsewhere might not have heard of.
Yeah, I'm a big collector of those too. My favorite is a Ben Folds 5 shirt.
He's still around the corner for me.
I have my original shirt from like 1995, and it's one of those shirts I only break out every now and then because I want to kind of keep it intact. But that's probably my favorite rock shirt. So I have quite a collection myself, although I don't quite fit in them. I've grown a little more in 20 years.
I've got a Scruffy the Cat t-shirt. There was a band from Boston. They used to play here a lot. And it's just like a Kleenex now. It's been, so it's the same thing. I almost never wear it. So
knowing everything you do that you've picked up in the food industry, would you get back into it if you were 20 years old today and, we didn't have COVID, if the world were a normal place, would you get into the culinary industry?
Yeah, I probably would, I guess. I don't know. Like I said, I really love not being in charge of anything right now. But if I were even 20 years younger, I probably would do it. I would more on my own terms, I guess, to start with. But it really did suit me in many ways. But you have to, like I say, you have to be ready to just work your butt off. I mean, people think it's like giving a dinner party every night, but honestly, it's like working in a coal mine. It's like, it's really hard work. And I warn people too. I mean, there was about 10 years ago, half of my friends had midlife crises, right? And so they all decided they wanted to go in the restaurant business. And I said, no, you are too old. You know what? You don't even know,
Well, even the personal chef business, because that's what I'm doing now. And people think that that's easier. And it's not, it's different. It's easier in some respects, but it's like if you've never worked in food service. So I'm seeing all these people who are like accountants and at 45 want to be a personal chef. It's like, well, wow. Like, do you realize what it's going to be like? It's not just like throwing a dinner party at your house. There's a lot that goes into it. Sure.
Well, there's lots and lots of, well, for one thing, what if you get somebody that's impossibly picky to work for? That's what, for starts. And then, I don't know, you have the health concerns to consider, and you have, people's all these allergy things people seem to have these days, all this kind of stuff. No. I have several friends who do that too.
Different problems, but it's definitely rewarding. I mean, I'm enjoying it more than working in a restaurant.
I've done a few things like that, but only for friends or occasionally for fundraising events that friends do for small dinner parties and stuff. And I usually take one of the guys that work for me and, and the same thing. But I also have friends who do the same people every week. They're like hired by these families to come in 3 days a week because the parents are busy and they have a lot of, they have children and all this kind of stuff. So I've done the little, but sometimes people's kitchens are not, they're little and I did this huge dinner party that was it wasn't huge. It was 25. It was the 50th wedding anniversary for people I've known forever. And it was really fun to do, but my God, it was like, it was like doing it out of the trunk of my car.
Yeah, I did one just this past weekend where there was no formal dining room. It was an eat-in kitchen at an island. So the island was my work table and where they're going to be eating. So I had it while they were in the other room having cocktails and stuff. But when they came in to eat, my butt was literally 2 feet from like the thing. So I'm working at the stove and like, I could butt bump with the guests there. And in the time of social distancing, I really wanted a little more room. Most of my guests have been able to eat outside or in another room, but now I'm in this tiny kitchen with like 8 ladies who are a foot from me. And it was a little closer than I wanted it to be, but I had no idea going into it. What are some of your favorite culinary resources? Like if someone wanted to, just even recreationally cooking, what are some of your favorite cookbooks, websites, magazines, things just for cooking in general?
Funny, you should mention that. One of the things I've been doing while I've sort of been quarantined is I've been trying to organize my mess because I've lived in this house since 1984. And although I was never here because I was always at work, it's full of crap. And one of the things I have is 10,000 cookbooks. And so I've been organizing mine. And so I've organized them. I'm looking at them over here now. I've organized them in a sort of a logical way to me. My first clump of them is sort of the favorite classics that I had when I started at La Residence. When we were all at La Residence, everybody was, even Bill and Morton they knew the food of France, but they had never trained it. And so we worked our way through Julia Child, so Julia Child, Simca, Marcella Hazan, that 50th anniversary Joy of Cooking, Paula Wolfert, another one, people like that. So I've got a clump of those. And then I have everybody I know has written a cookbook, and so I have all my friends' favorites. Next, I couldn't really even pick one out. I don't know if I like something about almost all of them, maybe because I'm fond of the people who wrote them or whatever. And I learned from my Latino friends. My friend Rosie, she's married to one of the guys that worked for me forever, and she showed me how to make tamales and stuff like that. So we did some classes together, and that was fun. A lot of times these days, it's just me. It's interesting, and cooking for one person is really sort of tedious to me at this point. So what I do is we have a pretty good farmers market, several times a week. So I go there and I just see what's there. And then that sort of informs what I'm going to have next. There's a little butcher shop down the street, same thing. There's a fish market down the street, same thing. So I don't really plan what I'm going to cook and stuff like that. I just sort of see what's around, I guess it's both my seasonal upbringing and then the way we ran Crooks as well. One thing I've been doing, I've been making, I don't know why I started doing this even. It's sort of, so I've been making these baking videos on Facebook. And I don't know why I started doing it, but I have a constituency now. And so what I do is I make something. Usually, lately it's been cakes. It's not always been cakes, and usually it's from somebody's cookbook that's a friend of mine or that I have some association with. And then because I'm doing it on my phone on Facebook, they're like in little 5-minute chunks, maybe 4, and I don't really edit very well. And then at the end of each thing, I give a little rant about politics. So. Anyway, I had just thought, well, this is really stupid. Why are you doing this? And so I sort of announced I wasn't going to do it anymore. That was dumb. And I had this huge outcry. Don't you dare stop. Are you crazy? So I'm still doing that. I'm going to do one today, actually. So that's been sort of a strange, I don't know why I started. I don't know what in the world possessed me to do the first one. And I think the first one might have been, what did I do first? I think actually I did Gumbo's Arab because it was Mardi Gras. That's probably it. I love Mardi Gras. And so I think that was, and that's not a cake, of course, but that's what started me doing these videos. And I was sort of seduced by the accolade that they they produced. So now I can't stop. So today I'm doing a persimmon pound cake. So it's persimmon season here. They're everywhere. They're like weeds, you know.
I haven't had any persimmons this season yet, and I think I need to go find some before the season's gone. So have you lived anywhere else in the U.S., or have you always been a North Carolina guy?
I was born in Eastern North Carolina, and I lived there until I was 18. And then I came to Chapel Hill, which is also in North Carolina, to go to school. And I was a horrible student. I was a very good hippie, so I wandered around a lot. But I mainly always had an address here. There was a while I worked for a theater company. I was in New York. I was a chorus boy, believe it or not, for a couple of years. And I lived in New York, in Manhattan, for a year and a half or so, and then was on the road with the theater company. But yeah, basically, I've lived here in Chapel Hill. I've lived here I've been in this house since 1984, and I came here in 1967. So I've lived here longer than anywhere. But I'm from down east. My great grandmother was from Cape Hatteras, so.
So what's the key to staying young? It seems like you're very young at heart and very active. Any secrets?
Well, I've talked to my doctor a little bit about this, but I don't have a car. I haven't had a car since 1973, and I've ridden a bicycle every day for like 50 years or whatever. So that, it takes its toll on one's knees. But no, I think I'm in pretty good health. I mean, I'm quite lucky, actually. I think I don't have anything really wrong with me.
That's fantastic. I've been walking 5 miles a day. I started back in July, and then this morning I switched up to bike riding because I want to go get some food. But I think more people need to be walking and biking.
I enjoy it, and I do everything on the bicycle. I do all my shopping and all this kind of stuff, and people are saying, "I'll give you a ride." And I go, "No, really." Even when the weather's really crummy. I mean, if it's a sleet storm, of course I don't. But no, I really like it. I don't mind getting rained on, and I enjoy it. I don't know. I really enjoy. I look forward to it sometimes. I'm glad every. So, and this is a good town for bicycling. Everybody bikes, and there are bike lanes, and the traffic is used to seeing bicyclists and things like that. So, another place might not be so pleasant, but this is here. So,
anything else you want to go over before we get out of here today?
No, I've enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. And to all our listeners, this has been the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. As always, you can find us at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org and on all social media. Thanks so much and have a great week. Thanks for listening to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show or sponsoring a show, please let us know. We can be reached at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.